What if the reason you're still broke has nothing to do with money? You've read the books. You've watched the videos. You've said the affirmations in the mirror, half believing them, half hoping someone's listening. And yet, somehow, the bills still come. The bank account still dips lower than you'd like. And that quiet voice in the back of your mind whispers, maybe this isn't for me. But here's something nobody told you. Something that changes everything once you really hear it. The 5 habits that build wealth, the real, lasting kind, have almost nothing to do with hustle. Nothing to do with luck. Nothing to do with some secret formula the rich are hiding from you. They're quieter than that. Stranger than that. And one of them, you're probably doing the exact opposite of right now, without even realizing it. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand money and yourself in a way you never have before. Let's start with something simple. Something so simple it almost sounds like nothing. Notice what you say to yourself when you check your bank account. Go ahead, think about it. The last time you opened that app or glanced at that statement, what was the very first thing that ran through your mind? For most people, it's something like, not enough, or maybe a tightening in the chest, a small wave of dread before the numbers even load. And here's what almost nobody tells you. That reaction isn't just a feeling. It's a habit. And like every habit, it's been built, repeated, reinforced, until it runs on its own, almost invisible to you. Napoleon Hill spent 20 years studying the wealthiest men of his era, men who built empires out of nothing. And one thing kept showing up again and again, in different words, from different mouths. The way these men thought about money was fundamentally different from the way most people think about it. Not because they were smarter, not because they had some advantage you don't have, but because somewhere along the way, sometimes early, sometimes after losing everything, they made a decision. A quiet one. Almost nobody around them even noticed it happening. They decided that money was not their enemy. Now, sit with that for a second, because I know how that sounds. Of course, money's not my enemy. I want more of it. But think about how you actually talk about money. Think about the words you use. I can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are just lucky. There's never enough. Every one of those phrases, and I guess you've said at least one of them this week, carries a hidden message. A message that says, money is scarce, money is hard to get, money is something other people have and you don't. And here's the strange part. The mind doesn't just record that message. It acts on it. Hill called this the law of the mind's response to dominant thoughts. A complicated phrase for something very simple. Whatever idea you hold in your mind most often, your mind starts treating as the truth. Not because it's actually true, but because repetition, to your mind, looks a lot like fact. So if you spend years, maybe decades, telling yourself that money is hard, that you're not good with money, that people like you don't get rich, your mind doesn't argue with you. It agrees. And then it starts looking for evidence to prove you right. That's the first habit. And it's the one almost everyone gets wrong, because it doesn't feel like a habit. It feels like reality. Think about someone you know, maybe a parent, maybe a friend, who always seems to be one step away from disaster, financially. The car breaks down right when they finally saved a little. The unexpected bill shows up the week before payday. It's like money slips through their fingers no matter how hard they grip it. Now think about someone else. Someone who seems to just attract opportunity. Not because they're more talented. Sometimes, honestly, they're not even working harder. But somehow, the right person introduces them to the right deal. Somehow, the promotion lands on their desk. Somehow, things keep working out. For years, people called this luck. Hill didn't believe in luck, not the way most people use the word. He believed what you carry inside your mind, you eventually carry into your life. Not by magic, by something far more grounded than that. Because here's what really happens. When your mind is filled with scarcity, with I can't, with there's never enough, you stop seeing opportunities even when they're right in front of you. Your brain, quite literally, filters them out. It's not that the opportunity wasn't there. It's that you weren't looking for it, because some part of you had already decided it wasn't for you. But when your mind shifts, even slightly, toward the idea that money flows, that opportunity exists, that you are someone capable of building wealth, something changes in how you move through the world. You start noticing things you didn't notice before. You start saying yes to things you would have dismissed. You start asking questions you never thought to ask. This is the first habit. Not affirmations, not chanting in front of a mirror. Something quieter and far more powerful. A daily decision to stop speaking the language of lack. And I want you to remember something as we go through this video. This isn't about pretending your bills don't exist. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about something Hill understood better than almost anyone of his time. That reality bends, slowly but surely, toward whatever you feed your mind the most. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because once you start paying attention to your inner dialogue around money, you'll notice something else. Something underneath it. Something that's been running the whole show without you even knowing it was there. Here's that something underneath it all. It's not your bank balance. It's not your job title. It's not even the words you say out loud about money. It's the picture you carry of yourself. Stop for a moment and ask yourself something honest. When you imagine your future 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you see? Be honest. Not the answer you think you should give. The real one. The one that flashes through your mind before you have time to dress it up. For most people, that picture looks a lot like today. Maybe a little better. A slightly nicer apartment. A little more breathing room. But fundamentally, the same person, doing the same things, living roughly the same life, just with a few less worries. And here's the thing nobody wants to hear. That picture? It's not a prediction. It's a blueprint. Hill spent his life studying men who went from absolute nothing, and I mean nothing, men who'd lost everything in fires, in wars, in failed businesses, to becoming some of the wealthiest people in the country. And when he asked them how, the answer was almost never about strategy. It was about identity. These men didn't see themselves as someone trying to become rich. They saw themselves as someone who was already, in some sense, the person they were building toward. The wealth came later. The identity came first. Now, I know what that might sound like. It might sound like wishful thinking, like pretending. But stay with me, because this is where most people misunderstand the whole idea and miss out on what's actually being said. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's not about driving a car you can't afford or buying things to look successful while you're drowning in debt. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is something that happens quietly, internally, long before any external change shows up. Think about it like this. Imagine two people. Both lose their job on the same day. Same industry, same severance, same bank account balance. The first person spends the next few weeks in a kind of fog, sends out a few applications, feels the weight of it every single day, talks to friends about how hard the job market is, how unfair everything feels, how scared they are about what comes next. The second person also feels the shock, also feels scared, because they're human, and this is genuinely hard. But somewhere inside, something else is happening too. A small, quiet voice that says, okay, this isn't the end of something. This is the beginning of something else. Same circumstances, same starting point, but two completely different inner pictures of what comes next. And 6 months later, you can probably guess which one of them is in a stronger position. Not because the universe favored them, not because they were luckier, but because the picture they carried shaped the actions they took, the people they reached out to, the risks they were willing to take, the doors they were willing to knock on. Hill called this concept self-suggestion, the practice of consciously feeding your subconscious mind a clear, vivid picture of who you're becoming, until that picture becomes so familiar, so normal to you, that your mind starts working, quietly, behind the scenes, to make it real. Not through some mystical force, through something far more practical, through attention, through focus, through the thousands of small decisions you make every day without even realizing you're making them. Here's an example. If you see yourself as someone who's always struggling financially, what happens when an opportunity comes along that requires a bit of risk, a bit of investment, a bit of stepping outside your comfort zone? Most likely, you talk yourself out of it. That's not realistic for someone like me. I can't afford to take that chance. And you walk away, not because the opportunity was bad, but because it didn't match the picture you were carrying of yourself. But if you see yourself, even quietly, even privately, as someone who's building towards something bigger, that same opportunity lands differently. You still feel the fear. You still feel the risk. But something in you says, this is the kind of thing someone like me would do. That's the second habit. And it's not about pretending to be rich. It's about something much deeper, becoming, in your mind, the version of yourself that the life you want would actually belong to. And once that picture starts to shift, even just a little, something else begins to happen. Something that most people never expect, and almost nobody talks about. Here's what most people never expect. Once that inner picture starts to shift, even slightly, the world around you doesn't change overnight. Your bank account doesn't suddenly fill up. Your job doesn't suddenly transform. But something else does. Something smaller, at first. Something almost easy to miss. You start noticing things. A conversation you would have walked past before suddenly catches your attention. Someone mentions an idea, a project, a way of doing something, and instead of letting it slide by like background noise, something in you leans in. A skill you've been sitting on for years, something you never thought twice about, suddenly looks different to you. You start wondering, quietly, could this actually be worth something? This is what Hill called the law of attraction, but not in the way the phrase gets used today, tossed around like a magic trick, like the universe is some kind of vending machine waiting for your order. That's not what he meant. And honestly, that version of the idea has done a lot of damage, because it sets people up to feel like failures when wishing alone doesn't pay the rent. What Hill actually described was something much more grounded. He said that a mind focused on a clear purpose begins to notice, almost involuntarily, the things that are aligned with that purpose. Not because those things weren't there before, but because your attention, for the first time, is actually pointed in that direction. Think about it like this. Have you ever bought a car, and then suddenly started seeing that exact same car everywhere? On the road, in parking lots, in commercials? It's not that more of those cars suddenly appeared in the world. It's that your mind, for the first time, started paying attention to them. Money works the same way. Opportunity works the same way. When your mind is constantly occupied with worry, with bills, with lack, with how am I going to make it through this month, that's what your attention locks onto. Every conversation, every thought, every decision gets filtered through that lens. But when your mind starts to hold a different question, not how do I survive, but what is mine to build, your attention starts locking onto different things. Opportunities that were always there. People who were always around you. Ideas that have been sitting quietly in the back of your mind for years, waiting for you to finally take them seriously. This is the third habit, and it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. Most people who experience it don't even realize, in the moment, that anything has shifted. They just notice, looking back months later, that their life had started moving in a different direction, and they can't quite point to the exact day it began. But it began somewhere. It began with attention, with a mind that stopped asking, why don't I have enough, and started asking, what am I here to create? And here's something I want you to feel, right now, as you're listening to this. Not just understand, feel. You are closer to that shift than you think. Maybe you've already started noticing it. Maybe, even while listening to this video, something in you is recognizing pieces of your own story in what's being said. A moment where you almost said yes to something and didn't. A skill you've been underestimating. A version of your life you've quietly imagined, but never told anyone about. If that's true for you, if some part of what we've talked about so far feels like it's speaking directly to something inside you, I want you to do something simple. Right now, before you keep watching. In the comments, write the words, I am ready. Not because typing words changes your bank account, but because there's something powerful about declaring something, even quietly, even to strangers on the internet, that you've been carrying inside, unspoken, maybe for years. Write, "I am ready." And as you write it, let yourself mean it. Even just a little. Even if part of you doesn't fully believe it yet. Because the people who end up building the life they imagined, they didn't start by having everything figured out. They started by being willing to say, even before they had proof, "I am ready for this." Now, let's talk about something that might be the most misunderstood part of this entire conversation. Something that, once you understand it, changes the way you see every wealthy person you've ever met. Here's the misunderstood part. When most people picture someone wealthy, they picture a result. A house, a car, a number in an account, freedom from worry. What they don't picture, what almost nobody pictures, is the years before that. The quiet years. The years where nothing visible was happening yet. Hill spent time with men who, by the time he met them, were already wealthy beyond most people's imagination. But what fascinated him wasn't where they ended up. It was what they were doing with their time and their failures, long before anyone called them successful. And here's what he found, again and again, in story after story. Almost every one of them had failed. Not once, often many times. Businesses that collapsed, investments that disappeared, years where they had less than they'd started with. But here's the difference. Here's the thing that separated them from everyone else who'd also failed, who'd also lost money, who'd also had reason to give up. They treated failure as information, not as identity. I want you to really sit with that distinction, because it's easy to hear and easy to forget. When most people fail at something, financially, especially, there's a quiet voice that whispers something dangerous. Not just, "That didn't work," but, "I am someone this doesn't work for." Can you feel the difference between those two sentences? "That didn't work" is about an event. It happened, it's over, and now you know something you didn't know before. "I am someone this doesn't work for" is about identity. And once that sentence settles into someone's mind, it doesn't just affect that one situation. It starts coloring everything. The next opportunity gets seen through that lens. The next risk feels even riskier. The next idea gets dismissed before it's even fully formed. Why bother? It'll just end up like last time. This is the fourth habit, and it might be the hardest one, because it requires something most people are never taught how to do: separating what happened to you from who you believe you are. Hill wrote about a man, a salesman, struggling, deeply in debt, on the edge of giving up entirely, who one evening sat down and, almost out of desperation, started writing out exactly what he wanted his life to look like. Not vaguely, specifically, the income he wanted, the kind of work he wanted to be doing, the kind of man he wanted to become. And then, this is the part people skip over, he started reading that piece of paper every single day, morning and night, not as a wish, as a kind of quiet, private conversation with the person he intended to become. Nothing changed immediately. Of course it didn't. He still had the same debts the next morning, the same job, the same problems, but something inside him had shifted. And slowly, not overnight, not in some dramatic transformation, the way he showed up in his work started to change. The way he spoke to clients, the risks he was willing to take, the ideas he was willing to pursue, the ones he would have dismissed before as not for someone like me. Within a few years, that same man was earning more than he'd ever imagined. Not because the piece of paper was magic, but because the daily act of reading it had quietly, persistently, rewired the picture he carried of himself. And that picture had started shaping his choices, one small decision at a time. This is what failure looks like when you stop treating it as a verdict. It becomes a teacher, a strange, sometimes painful, but ultimately useful teacher, one that's constantly showing you what doesn't work, so that what's left, eventually, is what does. And here's something most people never realize until much later in life. The people you admire, the ones who seem to have it figured out, the ones whose lives look enviable from the outside, Almost all of them have a list of failures longer than yours. They just stopped letting those failures define them. Somewhere along the way, they made peace with the idea that failing at something is not the same as failing as a person. Now, there's one more habit left, and it might be the one that ties everything else together. Because everything we've talked about so far, the way you speak, the picture you carry, the attention you give, the way you respond to failure, all of it comes down to one final thing. One thing that, without it, none of the rest can fully take root. Here's that one final thing. It's the habit of action, but not action the way most people think about it. When people hear, take action, they usually picture something big. A bold leap, quitting the job, starting the business, the dramatic moment that makes for a good story later. But that's not where wealth actually begins. Not in Hill's research, and not in real life either. It begins somewhere much smaller, somewhere almost embarrassingly ordinary. Hill noticed something interesting about the men he studied. Before any of them made their fortune, before the big breakthrough, before the company that made them millions, there was always a period where they were doing something small, consistently, almost invisibly, while everyone around them was waiting for permission to begin. A man who would later build one of the largest businesses of his time started by doing one simple thing every single day. That took him maybe 20 minutes. Reading, studying, writing down ideas. Not because he had a plan yet. He didn't. He just had a feeling, a quiet, persistent feeling, that something was forming and that showing up for it, even in small ways, mattered. And here's what's strange about that. From the outside, nothing was happening. If you'd watched this man during those years, you wouldn't have seen anything that looked like building wealth. You'd have seen an ordinary person doing an ordinary thing day after day. But internally, something was accumulating. Knowledge, clarity, confidence. The kind of quiet momentum that doesn't show up in a bank statement, but shows up everywhere else. In how you carry yourself, in the questions you start asking, in the conversations you're suddenly ready for when they happen. This is the part almost nobody talks about, because it's not exciting. There's no dramatic before and after. There's just a person showing up, day after day, for something that doesn't have proof yet. And I think this is where most people get stuck. Because we live in a world that wants results fast. We want to see the number in the account go up this month, this week, today. And when it doesn't, when the small action doesn't immediately produce a big result, the temptation is to stop, to say, this isn't working, and go back to whatever felt safer, even if that safer thing was actually keeping you stuck. But here's something Hill understood, something that took him years of studying these men to fully see. The small action isn't the thing that creates wealth directly. The small action is what keeps the picture alive. It's what tells your mind every single day, I am someone who does this. I am someone who shows up for this. And remember what we talked about earlier. The picture you carry of yourself shapes everything. So every time you take that small action, even if nothing visible happens that day, you are reinforcing the picture. You're casting a vote, quietly, for the person you're becoming. Think about someone learning to play an instrument. In the first weeks, there's no music. There's just noise, mistakes, fingers that don't quite know where to go. If you judge the process by results alone, you'd quit in the first week. I'm clearly not good at this. But something is happening underneath the noise. Patterns are forming. The brain is rewiring itself, slowly, in ways that don't show up yet, but are absolutely real. Wealth building works the same way. The first weeks, months, sometimes longer, often look like nothing. You're reading, you're learning, you're having conversations, you're noticing things. You're saying yes to small opportunities that don't pay much or don't pay at all, but that put you in rooms you weren't in before. And then, and this is the part that surprises people every time, something shifts. Not all at once, but suddenly, looking back, you realize you're not the same person who started this. You know things you didn't know. You're connected to people you weren't connected to. You're seeing opportunities you would have walked right past months ago. This is the fifth habit. Not grand gestures. Just consistency, showing up, day after day, for the version of yourself you're quietly becoming, long before anyone else can see it. And here's something worth sitting with, before we go any further. All 5 of these habits, the way you speak about money, the picture you carry of yourself, where your attention goes, how you respond to failure, and the small actions you take, none of them work in isolation. They feed each other. One small shift in one area starts to influence the others. And once that begins, once that quiet momentum starts building, something happens that's difficult to put into words, but unmistakable once you've felt it. It's difficult to put into words, but let me try anyway. There's a moment, and if you've ever experienced even a small version of it, you'll know exactly what I mean, where things stop feeling like effort and start feeling like motion. Not motion in the sense of speed, not everything suddenly happening fast, but motion in the sense of direction. Like for the first time in a long time, you're not standing still, fighting against the current, wondering if any of this is even working. Hill described something similar when he talked about what he called definiteness of purpose. A clumsy phrase, maybe, by today's standards. But the idea underneath it is simple, and it's something almost everyone has felt at least once in their life, even if only briefly. Think about a time, maybe years ago, when you were working towards something specific. Maybe it was saving for something. Maybe it was a goal at work. Maybe it was something personal, something nobody else even knew about. And at some point, during that time, you probably felt it. That sense of everything lining up. Days that used to feel long suddenly felt purposeful. Conversations that used to feel like small talk suddenly felt relevant, because somehow they connected to what you were working toward. People showed up. Information showed up. Things that had been sitting around you for years, unnoticed, suddenly mattered. That feeling, that's not an accident. And it's not magic either, despite how magical it can feel in the moment. What's actually happening is this. When your mind holds a clear, specific picture of where you're going, not a vague wish, but something real, something you can almost see, your mind starts organizing everything around that picture. Information gets sorted differently. Priorities shift. Decisions that used to feel difficult suddenly feel obvious, because you finally have something to measure them against. Now contrast that with the alternative. Most people don't have that clear picture. Most people are operating with something much vaguer. I want to make more money. I want things to be easier. I wish I had more. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. But notice how different that feels from having something specific. I want more money doesn't give your mind anything to organize around. It's too broad, too abstract. Your mind doesn't know what to do with it, so mostly, it does nothing. It files it away as a wish and goes back to whatever it was focused on before, which, for most people, is whatever feels urgent that day. The bill that's due, the argument from this morning, the thing someone said that's been bothering you. But something specific, even something modest, gives your mind a direction. And once it has a direction, everything we've talked about so far starts to activate. The way you speak about money shifts, because now there's something real to speak toward. The picture you carry of yourself shifts, because now there's a clearer version of that picture to hold on to. Your attention shifts, because now there's something specific for it to notice. Failure becomes easier to process, because now it's information about a path, not a verdict on your worth. And the small daily actions stop feeling random, because now they're connected to something. This is what Hill meant when he talked about purpose. Not some grand, world-changing mission. Just something specific enough that your mind has something to hold on to. Something real enough that, when an opportunity related to it shows up, you recognize it, instead of letting it pass by because it didn't look like anything important. And here's something worth thinking about, honestly, right now, while you're listening. What is that thing for you? Not the vague version, more money, financial freedom, whatever phrase comes easiest. I mean the real one, the specific one, the one you might not have said out loud to anyone, maybe not even to yourself, not really. Maybe it's a number. Maybe it's a kind of life, what your mornings look like, what your work looks like, who you're spending your time with. Maybe it's something you wanted years ago and quietly stopped letting yourself want because it felt too far away, too unrealistic, too much like wishful thinking. I'm not asking you to answer that out loud, but I am asking you to actually think about it. Because everything we've talked about so far, every habit, every shift, works so much better once there's something specific underneath it. Something real for your mind to organize around. And once you have that, even a rough version of it, even something you're not totally sure about yet, something else starts to happen. Something that connects directly to the very first thing we talked about, all the way back at the beginning of this video. It connects back to the very beginning, to the way you speak, to the words running through your mind, mostly unnoticed, every single day. Because here's something interesting. Once you have something specific, a real picture of where you're going, the way you talk to yourself naturally starts to shift, almost without effort. Not because you're forcing positive thinking, but because now your inner dialogue has something to be about. Let me explain what I mean. Without a specific direction, your inner dialogue tends to default to commentary, reactions to whatever's happening. This is frustrating. I'm so tired of this. Why does this always happen to me? It's reactive. It responds to the world, rather than moving toward anything. But once there's something specific you're working toward, even quietly, even privately, your inner dialogue starts to change shape. It starts asking different questions. How does this connect to what I'm building? Is this the kind of thing that moves me closer or further away? What would the version of me who has this already, how would they handle this moment? That last question is one Hill came back to again and again in different forms throughout his work, not as some trick, but as a genuinely useful tool for noticing the gap between where you are and where you're going, and slowly, naturally, closing it. Here's an example. Let's say you're at a point in your week where you're tired, money feels tight, and something unexpected comes up. Maybe an invitation to something, a small expense, a decision that, on the surface, doesn't seem like a big deal. The old pattern, the scarcity pattern, says no automatically. Can't afford it. Not worth the risk. Better safe than sorry. And sometimes, that's genuinely the right call. This isn't about saying yes to everything. But here's the question worth asking, quietly, in that moment. Not can I afford this? But is this something the person I'm becoming would do? Sometimes the answer is still no. And that's fine. But sometimes, and this is where things start to shift, the answer is yes. Not because money suddenly isn't tight, but because you start recognizing that some decisions are investments in the picture you're building, even when they're small, even when nobody else would notice the difference. A conversation you almost didn't have, a class you almost didn't take, a person you almost didn't reach out to because it felt awkward or unnecessary, or like it probably wouldn't lead anywhere. These small yes, they add up in ways that are almost impossible to track in real time. You won't be able to point to the exact moment one of them mattered. But years later, looking back, you'll see how a handful of these small decisions quietly redirected the entire trajectory of your life. And here's something else worth noticing. As your inner dialogue shifts, as it starts asking these different questions, something happens to the way you experience setbacks too. Remember what we talked about earlier, the difference between "that didn't work" and "I am someone this doesn't work for." Once you have a specific direction, setbacks start to feel different. Not painless, they're still real, they still hurt, but less like an ending and more like a redirect. Like information about the path, rather than a verdict on whether you deserve to be on it at all. This is the quiet thread that runs through everything we've talked about. It's not really about money, not at its core. It's about the relationship between the words in your mind, the picture you carry, and the actions that naturally follow from both. Hill spent decades trying to put this into language people could actually use. And if you strip away the era, the references, the old-fashioned phrasing, what's left is something remarkably simple. Your outer life tends to reflect, with a kind of strange consistency, what's happening in your inner life. Not perfectly, not instantly, but over time, in ways that become impossible to ignore once you start looking for them. And once you start looking for them, once you start noticing this pattern in your own life, even in small ways, something shifts in how you see everyone around you too, including the people you might have once envied or resented or assumed had something you didn't. It shifts how you see everyone around you, including the people you might have once envied. Think about someone in your life, maybe someone you know personally, maybe someone you've only seen from a distance, who seems to have things figured out financially. Someone whose life looks, from the outside, like it just works. For a long time, it's easy to look at someone like that and feel a quiet sting, maybe even without realizing it. A small voice that says, "Must be nice," or "They don't know how hard it is for people like me," or "They probably got lucky, or had help, or started further ahead." And sometimes, honestly, that's true. Some people do start further ahead. That's real, and it matters, and pretending otherwise wouldn't be honest. But here's something worth considering. Something Hill noticed again and again across the dozens of people he studied, many of whom did not start further ahead, some of whom started with absolutely nothing, less than nothing, deep in debt, having lost everything more than once. What separated them wasn't where they started. It was something quieter, something almost invisible from the outside. It was what they were doing with their minds every single day while their circumstances were still difficult. Here's what I mean. Imagine two people, both struggling financially, both genuinely doing it hard. Both have reason to feel exactly the way they feel. The first person spends most of their mental energy on the problem itself. How bad things are. How unfair it feels. How other people have it easier. This isn't weakness, it's human. It's a completely understandable response to real difficulty. The second person is also struggling, also feels the weight of it. But somewhere, quietly, alongside that struggle, there's something else happening too. A small, persistent attention toward what's possible. Not denial of how hard things are, but a kind of dual awareness. This is hard right now, and also, I'm paying attention to anything that might be a way forward. Over time, and I mean real time, months, years, these two people's lives tend to diverge. Not because one of them deserved it more, not because one of them worked harder, necessarily, but because one of them was, every day, scanning for a way forward, while the other was, every day, reinforcing how stuck they were. And here's the thing about scanning for a way forward. Most of the time, it doesn't look like anything dramatic. It looks like noticing a comment someone made in passing. It looks like saying yes to a small opportunity that doesn't look like much. It looks like staying a little longer in a conversation that, on the surface, seems unrelated to anything important. These moments are easy to miss if you're not looking for them. And they're easy to find, once you are. This is why envy, as natural as it is, almost never tells the full story. When you look at someone whose life seems to work, you're seeing the result of thousands of small, invisible moments, most of which they probably don't even remember, because at the time, none of them seemed significant. And here's something that might be uncomfortable to hear, but I think it's worth saying anyway, because I think, deep down, you already know it's true. The version of you that builds the life you want. That version isn't waiting somewhere out in the future, waiting for circumstances to improve first. That version is available to you right now, today, in the middle of whatever you're currently dealing with. Not in some abstract, motivational poster way. I mean literally. The habits we've talked about, the way you speak, the picture you carry, where your attention goes, how you respond to setbacks, the small actions you take. None of them require your circumstances to change first. They're available to you exactly as you are, exactly where you are, right now. And this is, I think, the part that Hill understood better than almost anyone else who's ever written about this subject. He wasn't telling people to wait until they had money to start thinking like someone who has money. He was telling them the order goes the other way. The thinking comes first. Always. Not because thinking alone pays bills, it doesn't, but because thinking shapes everything that follows. every choice, every conversation, every door that gets noticed or missed. So here's a question worth sitting with, just for a moment, before we move forward. If nothing about your circumstances changed today, same bank account, same job, same problems, but your mind changed, even just slightly, in the direction we've been talking about, what would be different tomorrow about how you move through your day? What would be different tomorrow about how you move through your day? Take a moment with that, not as a rhetorical question, as a real one. Maybe the difference would be small. Maybe you'd notice yourself pausing, just slightly, before saying, "I can't afford that," and instead asking quietly, "Is that actually true, or is that just the thing I always say?" Maybe you'd catch yourself in a conversation, hearing about something, a side project, an idea, a different way of doing your work, and instead of thinking, "That's not for me," you'd let yourself wonder, just for a second, what if it was? Maybe nothing dramatic, just a small shift in attention, a small shift in the questions running quietly in the background of your mind. And here's something worth understanding about how change like this actually happens, because it's almost never the way it gets portrayed. We're conditioned by movies, by stories, by the way success gets talked about, to expect transformation to look like a moment, a turning point, a before and after. One day everything was one way, and then something happened, and after that, everything was different. But that's not how it works. Not in Hill's research, and not in real life either. What actually happens is much slower, much quieter, and honestly, much less satisfying to talk about, which is probably part of why it doesn't get talked about much. It looks like this. You start paying a little more attention to your inner dialogue. Not perfectly. You'll still catch yourself slipping back into old patterns, probably for a long time, but a little more than before. You start holding, even loosely, a slightly clearer picture of where you're heading. Not a detailed 5-year plan, just something a bit more specific than, "I want things to be better." You start noticing things you didn't notice before. Small things. A comment, an idea, a possibility that, a few months ago, would have passed by completely unnoticed. You start treating setbacks, and there will still be setbacks, plenty of them, a little differently. Not as proof that you're stuck, but as information. Annoying, sometimes painful information, but information. And you start doing small things, consistently, towards something, even before you're sure it'll lead anywhere. Especially before you're sure it'll lead anywhere. None of this, on its own, looks like much. If you were watching someone go through this from the outside, you probably wouldn't notice anything different about them. Not at first. Maybe not for a long time. But underneath, something is accumulating. Quietly. Persistently. The way sediment builds a riverbed, one layer at a time, invisible day to day, but undeniable looking back. And then, and this is the part almost nobody can predict, not even the person it's happening to, something shifts. Not because of one big moment, but because all those small shifts, accumulated over time, finally reach a kind of tipping point. An opportunity that, 6 months ago, you would have walked past, and now you don't. A conversation that, a year ago, you would have been too afraid to have, and now, somehow, it doesn't feel as impossible. People often look back on moments like this and call them lucky breaks. And in a sense, maybe they are. But what they don't see, what's almost impossible to see, even for the person it happened to, is the months, sometimes years, of quiet internal shifting that made that lucky break possible, made it visible, made it something that could actually be recognized and acted on, instead of passing by unnoticed, the way it might have a year earlier. This is, I think, the part of Hill's work that gets lost the most. People want the lucky break. They want the moment. They skip past the years of quiet internal work that made the moment possible, not because they're lazy, but because that part doesn't make for a good story. It's not exciting. It doesn't have a clear beginning or end. It's just time. Time spent, day after day, slightly differently than before. But here's what I want you to understand, especially if you're someone who's been waiting, maybe for a long time, for something to change. The waiting isn't separate from the change. The waiting, if you're spending it the way we've talked about, with attention, with a clearer picture, with small consistent actions, the waiting is the change. It's happening right now, even if you can't see it yet, even if nothing on the outside looks different. And there's one more thing about this, something that ties everything together and brings us back, in a strange way, to where we started. It brings us back to where we started. Remember the beginning of this video? The question about what runs through your mind when you check your bank account. That small, almost unnoticed reaction, the tightening, the dread, the not enough. Here's something worth understanding about that reaction. It's not really about money. Not at its core. What it's really about is a relationship. The relationship between you and the idea of enough. And this might be the most important thing we talk about in this entire video, so I want you to really hear it. Most people, when they think about wealth, imagine it as a destination, a point where they'll finally arrive, and at that point, the feeling of not enough will disappear. They'll finally relax, finally feel secure, finally feel like they've made it. But here's what Hill observed, and what countless people have confirmed since, often the hard way. That feeling of not enough doesn't disappear when the number in the account changes. Not automatically, not on its own. There are people with more money than they could spend in several lifetimes who still feel, internally, exactly the way they felt when they had nothing. The number changed. The feeling didn't. And there are people, fewer, but they exist, who have relatively modest amounts, by comparison, but who carry themselves with a kind of internal steadiness. A sense that, regardless of what happens, they'll figure it out. That feeling isn't dependent on the number either. So what's actually going on here? I think it's this. The feeling of enough or not enough isn't really a financial measurement. It's a habit of attention, a pattern, repeated so often it becomes automatic, of where your mind goes when it encounters the topic of money. If that pattern is scarcity, if the automatic response is not enough, what if I can't, then more money doesn't fix the pattern. It just gives the pattern more to work with, more things to worry about, more ways to imagine loss. But if that pattern shifts, even before the money does, something different happens. The same circumstances, the same bank account, start to feel different. Not because anything external changed, but because the lens changed. This is, I think, the deepest version of everything we've talked about today. The 5 habits, the way you speak, the picture you carry, where your attention goes, how you respond to setbacks, the small actions you take. They're not really steps on a checklist. They're not separate things you do one after another. They're all expressions of one underlying shift. A shift away from a mind that's organized around lack, and toward a mind that's organized around possibility, toward growth, toward becoming. And here's the strange, almost paradoxical thing about this shift. The more it happens, the more your mind organizes itself around possibility instead of lack, the less the external numbers seem to matter, even while, over time, those numbers tend to improve. Not because the numbers stopped matching. Bills are still real. Responsibilities are still real. But because the internal experience, the thing that was actually driving the dread, the tightness, the not enough, that experience starts to loosen. And from that looser place, decisions get made differently. Risks look different. Opportunities look different. Even setbacks look different. I want to be careful here, because I don't want this to sound like something it's not. This isn't about pretending problems don't exist. It's not about pretending you don't need money, or that money doesn't matter. Of course it matters. It matters for real, practical reasons, for security, for options, for the people you care about. But here's what Hill's work points to, again and again, in story after story. The path toward having enough, really, lastingly, in a way that holds up over time, runs through a shift that happens internally, first, not instead of external change. Alongside it, underneath it, making it possible. And if there's one thing I hope you take from everything we've talked about today, it's this. You don't have to wait for circumstances to change before you start. You can start exactly where you are, with the words you use, with the picture you carry, with where you point your attention, with how you respond to whatever happens next, with the next small thing you do. None of it requires permission. None of it requires proof in advance that it'll work. It just requires a beginning. And beginnings, real ones, are quieter than people expect. Beginnings are quieter than people expect. There's no music that plays. No moment where everything suddenly makes sense. No clear line between the person you were yesterday and the person you're becoming. It's just a Tuesday. An ordinary Tuesday, like any other. And on that Tuesday, something small happens. A thought, slightly different than the one you'd usually have. A pause, slightly longer than usual, before reacting the way you normally would. A small action, taken not because you were sure it would matter, but because some part of you decided to take it anyway. And that's it. That's the beginning. Not dramatic. Not even noticeable, most of the time, to the person it's happening to. I think about the people Hill studied. Men who, decades later, were written about in books, talked about in business schools, remembered as examples of what's possible. And I think about what their lives actually looked like on the Tuesdays that mattered most. Not the Tuesdays after they'd already succeeded. The Tuesdays before. The ordinary ones. The ones nobody was watching. On those Tuesdays, nothing about their lives looked remarkable. They had the same doubts you might have right now. The same tired mornings. The same moments of wondering whether any of it was actually going anywhere, or whether they were just fooling themselves. The difference, the only difference, really, is that on those ordinary Tuesdays, they kept doing the small things. Even without proof. Even without certainty. Even when, by every external measure, nothing had changed yet. And here's something worth thinking about, honestly, as we get close to the end of this conversation. You've been listening for a while now, and somewhere in the last hour, something probably happened. Something small, something quiet, maybe something you haven't even fully noticed yet. A thought that landed a little differently than you expected. A moment of recognition, that's me, or that's been me, or I've never thought about it that way before. Whatever that moment was, for you, I want you to take it seriously. Not in a dramatic way. Just seriously. The way you take seriously a small, quiet observation about yourself that turned out to be true. Because here's what tends to happen after a moment like that. Most people feel it, briefly, and then move on. The day continues. The video ends. Life goes back to normal, and the thought, whatever it was, gets buried under everything else that's happening. But some people, not many, but some, let that small moment actually land. They let it stay with them, just a little longer than usual. And in that slightly longer moment, something shifts. Not everything, not all at once, but something. Maybe it's the way they check their bank account tomorrow morning, a half-second pause before the old reaction kicks in. Maybe it's a conversation later this week where they almost dismiss an idea and then don't. Maybe it's nothing you could point to at all, just a quieter sense, underneath everything else, that something has begun, even if you couldn't explain to anyone exactly what. I can't tell you which kind of person you'll be after this video ends. Nobody can tell you that. Not me, not Hill, not anyone. That part is entirely, quietly yours. But I will say this. The fact that you're still here, still listening, this far into a video about habits and mindset and money, tells me something. It tells me that some part of you is already paying attention in a way that matters. Some part of you is already doing the thing we've been talking about this whole time. Noticing, considering, wondering maybe what if. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. That's exactly where every single story like this begins. So as we move toward the end of this video, I want to leave you with something to carry. Not a summary, not a checklist, just a thought to sit with the next time you find yourself reaching for your phone, checking your account, making a decision about money, big or small. The thought is this: you are not behind. You are not too late. You are not somehow exempt from what's been true for everyone who's ever built something lasting. You're just at the beginning. And beginnings, as we said, they're quiet. They don't ask for permission. They don't wait for proof. They just ask for one small thing: your willingness, right now, to begin treating your mind the way you'd treat anything else you wanted to grow. With attention, with patience, with consistency. And with that, let's bring this all together. Let's bring this together. 5 habits. We've talked about all of them now, though maybe not in the order you'd put them in a list. The way you speak about money, quietly noticing when the language of lack shows up, without forcing yourself to pretend it isn't there, just noticing. The picture you carry of yourself, not a fantasy, not a performance, but a quiet, internal sense of who you're becoming, held gently, revisited often. Where your attention goes, shifting gradually from what's wrong to what's possible, not by ignoring problems, but by making room, alongside them, for something else. How you respond when things don't work, separating the event from the identity, letting failure be information instead of a verdict. And the small things you do, consistently, especially before there's any proof they'll matter. Because those small things are what keep the picture alive, what tell your mind, every day, who you're becoming. 5 habits, but really one shift. A shift from a mind organized around lack, toward a mind organized around possibility. And here's something I want to say plainly, before we close. None of this works like a switch. You won't finish this video and wake up tomorrow as a different person. That's not how any of this happens. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're not being honest with you. What you can do, what's actually available to you, starting today, is begin paying attention to the words, to the picture, to where your mind goes, automatically, when money comes up. That's it. That's the beginning. Everything else follows from there, slowly, the way everything real tends to. If you've stayed with me until this point in the video, it's because you're committed to creating a life of abundance and success. That's why I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Every video here is designed to help you develop the mindset that attracts wealth, prosperity, and new opportunities every single day. Now, before we close completely, I want to leave you with one more thing. Something that ties back to everything we've talked about. Something I think you'll carry with you, maybe longer than you expect. Here's the thing I want to leave you with. Somewhere, right now, there's a version of your life, quieter, steadier, freer than the one you're currently living. Not perfect, not free of problems, but different in the ways that matter. That version of your life isn't far away in the sense of distance. It's not on the other side of some dramatic event, some lucky break, some moment where everything suddenly aligns. It's close, closer than it's ever been. Because it doesn't begin with circumstances. It begins with attention. And attention is something you have access to right now, in this exact moment, on this exact ordinary day. Think back to the question we asked at the very beginning. What runs through your mind when you check your bank account? That small, automatic reaction, the one that's been running for so long. It stopped feeling like a thought and started feeling like the truth. Here's what I want you to know about that reaction. It was never the truth. It was just a habit. A pattern repeated so many times, it forgot it was a choice. And patterns, even old ones, even ones that have been running for years, decades, patterns can shift. Not through force, not through some dramatic act of willpower, but through something much quieter. Through noticing, through a slightly longer pause before the old reaction takes over. Through a slightly different question, asked instead of the usual one. You've spent the last hour with these ideas. Some of them probably felt familiar, things you'd sensed before, but never quite had words for. Others maybe felt new, or uncomfortable, or like they were asking something of you that you're not sure you're ready to give yet. Whatever you're feeling right now, that's fine. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. Because here's the truth about everything we've talked about today. None of it asks you to be ready. None of it asks you to have it figured out. It just asks you to begin, quietly, today, in whatever small way feels true to you. Maybe that means noticing, just once today, the words you use about money, without judging yourself for it, just noticing. Maybe it means sitting for a few minutes, with a slightly clearer picture of where you're heading. Not the whole picture, just a little more than you had before. Maybe it means doing one small thing, something you've been putting off, something that doesn't seem like much, but that's been quietly waiting for you to take it seriously. Whatever it is, for you, it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. And somewhere down the road, maybe months from now, maybe longer, you might find yourself looking back at today, at this video, at this moment, right now, where you're hearing these words. And you might realize that something began here. Something small, something nobody else could see, something that, at the time, didn't feel like much of anything at all. That's how it always starts. Before you go, if this video gave you something to think about, even something small, follow this channel. There's more here, waiting for you, whenever you're ready for it. And if you know someone, 5 people, even, who might need to hear something like this today, share it with them. You never know which sentence, which moment, might be the one that starts something for someone else too. Take care of that picture you're carrying. It's closer than you think.